Okay, so are you ready to get our reading glasses all fogged up?
Oh,
And
yeah.
another deep dive into the world of books.
Sounds like a good time to me.
Today, we're heading to that digital haven of bibliophiles, the Membook subreddit.
It's a fascinating corner of the internet, isn't it?
It is just this teeming mass of opinions and ideas all about, well, books.
And those so many books, so little time threads,
Oh, tell me about it.
really capture that universal reader's lament,
Don't you wish there was more time in the day?
especially when you see those weekly recommendations.
Ah, those threads.
It's like a never-ending banquet of book suggestions.
I know, it's like, okay, I need a mystery that'll keep me up all night.
Or I want a love story that'll make me believe in true love.
But it has to have dragons.
Exactly. And the specificity of some of those requests is incredible.
I know, right? Like, I saw someone asking for books where the descriptions are like paint with words.
It's that kind of detail that makes those discussions so interesting.
It's like they know exactly what reading experience they're craving, even if they don't know the book yet.
And it reminds us that being specific about what we're looking for is key to finding those truly satisfying reads, whether online or in a real bookstore.
You know, speaking of literary buzz, the Nobel Prize in Literature is coming up soon, and there's already a ton of speculation.
Always a hot topic in the literary world.
Names like Kanzu, Mircea Cartarescu, and Carson are being thrown around. Do you have any early favorites?
You know, I'm more of a wait-and-see kind of reader when it comes to awards, but
Fair enough.
it's interesting to see names like Margaret Atwood coming up in discussions about authors who haven't won yet but have had such consistent
It
careers.
really makes you think, right? Like, what defines literary recognition?
Yeah.
Is it about consistent brilliance over time or that one big hit?
And what even makes a book a hit?
That is the question, isn't it?
Is it purely sales figures, critical acclaim, a bit of both?
Speaking of authors who seem to churn out those hits, Barbara Kingsolver, Cormac McCarthy come to mind.
They definitely have a knack for capturing the zeitgeist, wouldn't you say?
Totally like they're tapping into something deeper, some shared experience that resonates with readers.
And now I'm dying to hear about Memoirs of a Geisha.
Ah, yes. That sparked some interesting discussions over on more books.
What stood out to you?
So many people were talking about how the book deals with fate versus free will. Like, how much control do we really have over our lives?
Especially in a rigid system like the geisha world.
Right. And then that ending.
Oh,
People had a lot of feelings about that romantic plot twist with the chairman.
some loved it, some felt it was a bit out of left field.
Exactly. It's like our individual expectations about romance could really shape how we interpret a story's conclusion.
It reminds us that every reader brings their own unique perspective.
And sometimes those perspectives can lead to some really fascinating insights, like that discussion about Raymond Chandler's Farewell, My Lovely.
Ah, yes, particularly the symbolism of the pink bug, if I recall correct.
Yes. That seemingly insignificant detail sparked such a debate.
Some people saw it as representing Marlowe's tenacity, that refusal to give up.
Makes sense. He's always getting knocked down, but gets back up.
And it ties into that classic noir theme of resilience, that sliver of hope amidst all the darkness.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Chandler mentions the bug again at the very end of the book.
And
And nobody knows why. Like, what's the significance of bringing it back in those final moments?
maybe it's Chandler's way of saying that some things never really end, even when you close the book.
Ooh, I like that. Like a lingering sense of unease.
Or perhaps it's a nod to the cyclical nature of things, that idea that history repeats itself.
Okay, that's making me want to reread it with that in mind.
You and me both. Speaking of interpretations, what about Fingersmith?
Oh, Fingersmith definitely got people talking, especially about those plot twists.
Some readers felt that the baby swap, Susan's time in the asylum, were a bit too much.
Too convenient.
Yeah, like they were more for shock value than actual character development.
It's a tough balance for authors, Ro. You want to surprise readers, but it has to feel organic to the story.
Agreed. Twists for the sake of twists can sometimes backfire.
And speaking of twists and turns, that discussion about Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, Mr. Darcy, the king of brooding romance.
Right, but someone posed this really interesting question. Is he a romantic hero or a classic case of emotionally unavailable?
Now that's something to unpack.
Totally. Like, are we drawn to him because he's genuinely complex or because we're conditioned to romanticize those emotionally distant types?
It's like literature is giving us a chance to analyze our own relationship patterns, isn't it?
It's like Pride and Prejudice meets modern dating app woes.
Exactly. But sometimes it's the unexpected glitches that provide the most amusing moments, like that story about the reader who finished White Noise too early.
Oh, no,
Look.
because of the PDF formatting.
Yep, they got to the end and was like, wait, that's it.
It really shows how our reading experience can be influenced by things outside the actual text.
For sure. But now let's talk about something a little more lighthearted.
Bring on the nostalgia.
That Goosebumps thread was a trip down memory lane.
Oh my gosh, yes. Those books were like a rite of passage.
From The Curse of Camp Cold Lake to The Ghost Next Door.
R.L. Stine knew how to get under your skin, didn't he?
He did, even though he once said he never intended to write scary stories.
Really?
Apparently, he just wanted to write engaging stories for kids.
It's funny how that works out sometimes, right? The things we set out to do versus how they're received.
Absolutely. And speaking of reception, R.F. Kuang's Yellowface, being adapted for TV, is generating a lot of buzz.
Oh yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how they handle that adaptation.
It's a complex story dealing with race, identity, the publishing industry itself, a lot of potential there.
And adaptations can be so hit or miss, right?
Mm.
Will it do the book justice? Will it resonate with a wider audience?
Only time will tell. But that uncertainty is part of the excitement.
It is. And it's a good reminder that the literary world is always changing, always evolving.
And Verbooks is like a microcosm of that, this constantly shifting landscape of opinions, interpretations, and shared passions.
It's a reminder that even in our digital age, the love for a good book is something that connects us all.
It's like peeling back layers of a story with each reading, right?
Yeah, like those details that might have gone over your head the first time.
Exactly. You notice new things, make new connections.
It's like with Memoirs of a Geisha. Someone in the thread mentioned they initially thought it was a true story.
Oh, wow, really? See, that's fascinating.
It is. They didn't realize it was fiction until later.
Shows how our assumptions can totally shape our experience, huh?
Totally. Like we bring our own baggage to every book, even if we don't realize it.
And sometimes that baggage can lead us down some interesting paths, wouldn't you say?
For sure. But it's a good reminder to always be questioning our own interpretations, to be open to different perspectives.
Couldn't agree more. Speaking of different perspectives, that farewell, my lovely discussion was a wild ride.
Oh man, that pink bug, right?
People had some strong opinions about that bug.
It's amazing how one little detail can become such a focal point.
It's like that detail unlocks something bigger about the whole story, you know?
Yeah, like it's not just about the bug itself, but what it represents.
Exactly. And there's no one right answer, which is what makes these discussions so great.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
more about the process of unpacking those layers of meaning together.
Now, Fingersmith, that was another one that got people fired up.
Oh yeah, especially about those plot twists.
Like that comment about the baby swap and Susan's institutionalization.
Feeling a little too convenient, maybe?
Yeah, like did those twists serve the story or were they just there to shock?
It's tough because readers do love a good twist.
Yeah, of course. But it has to feel earned, right? Like it emerges naturally from the characters and the plot.
Otherwise, it's like, come on, author, you're just messing with us now.
Right. It takes you out of it.
Exactly. But when a twist works, it works.
It's magical. Speaking of things that can be magical, sometimes frustrating, but always fascinating relationships.
Oh, here we go. Diving into the deep end of romance.
Oh, the Pride and Prejudice thread took us there, didn't it?
Mr. Darcy. Always a hot topic.
Is he a dreamboat or a walking red flag?
Right. The debate rages on.
Someone even called him emotionally unavailable.
Which, let's be honest, tracks.
It does, but that makes him even more interesting, don't you think?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It makes you think about why we're drawn to certain types of people, both in fiction and real life.
For sure. Like, are we drawn to Mr. Darcy's broodiness because it's genuinely attractive, or because we've been conditioned by society to see it that way?
Deep stuff.
Right. It's like, thank you, Jane Austen, for the relationship therapy session disguised as a classic novel.
Exactly. But speaking of unexpected twists and turns.
The White Noise PDF situation.
Oh my gosh, yes. That poor reader who finished the book too early because of a formatting glitch.
Can you imagine? You're so engrossed, then bam, it's over.
I know, right? Like, talk about an anticlimactic reading experience.
It definitely shows that sometimes technology and literature don't mix.
They really don't. But you know what does mix well with literature?
Nostalgia.
Ding, ding, ding. That Goosebumps thread was a goldmine.
So many classic creepy stories.
Right. And it seems like everyone has a favorite Goosebumps book, which is amazing.
It's like a shared cultural experience for a certain generation.
Totally. Like we all huddled under our covers reading those books with flashlights.
And the best part is R.L. Stine didn't even set out to write scary stories.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he just wanted to write engaging stories for kids.
It's amazing how that happens, right? Like sometimes the things we create take on a life of their own.
It's true. And speaking of stories taking on new life, that Yellowface adaptation.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be interesting.
It's a tough book to adapt, for sure.
Definitely. It tackles some really complex issues.
It does, but I'm curious to see how they handle it.
It's like taking those conversations from the online forum and bringing them into people's living rooms.
Exactly. And with a book like Yellowface, which is so layered and deals with those really current issues, who knows what kind of conversations that might spark.
Right. It's a good reminder that books, even when they're telling fictional stories, can really make us think about the real world in new ways.
Totally. But sometimes it's also nice to revisit those books that were just pure fun, like that Goosebumps thread had me smiling.
Me too. What do you think it was about those books that captured so many imaginations? Even decades later, people are still talking about them.
It's that blend of spooky and safe, like the stories themselves could get kind of creepy.
Oh yeah, definitely creepy.
But there was always this sense that things would work out in the end.
It's true. R.L. Stine never went too dark, at least not in the Goosebumps series.
Right, it was more about that thrill of the unknown, the what's going to happen next feeling.
And he was so good at creating these worlds that felt familiar, but with that touch of the eerie, like it could be your school or your summer camp.
Exactly. It made it feel like, oh, that could be me in that story, which is part of what makes it so scary, right?
Absolutely. That's what makes a book stick with you when it gets under your skin like that.
And it's interesting because Stein himself said he never set out to write scary stories.
Wait, seriously, I never knew that.
Yeah, he just wanted to tell good stories that kids would connect with.
It's amazing how that works out sometimes, right? Like, you have an intention, but then the audience brings their own interpretation, their own fears and excitement.
It's so true. And that's the beauty of books, isn't it? There's this dialogue between the writer and the reader that continues long after the book is finished.
Exactly. And that's what we saw reflected in that 4-book subreddit, this vibrant community of readers, all engaging with these stories, debating them, dissecting them.
It's a good reminder that even in this age of instant everything, the written word still holds so much power.
It does. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our own little literary journey for today.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
It definitely doesn't. To all our listeners out there, what are some of the books that have stayed with you? What are those stories that you find yourself coming back to again and again? Head over to our website or social media and let us know.
We'd love to hear from you.
Happy reading, everyone.